The palace smelled of blood and fear. 20 doctors surrounded the royal bed, whispering, sweating, failing. The vampire king's son lay motionless, pale even by their kind standards, lips blue, veins blackening by the minute. Every healer in the kingdom had tried. None had succeeded. His heart, it stopped again, one shouted. Another plunged a silver needle into his arm. Nothing. The king gripped the bed frame until it cracked beneath his hand. "Fix him," he growled, "or you'll all join him in the ground." That's when she entered. A maid no one remembered hiring. Barefoot, quiet, carrying nothing but a small wooden bowl. She didn't kneel. She didn't tremble. She just looked at the dying boy and whispered, "You've been feeding him the wrong blood." The room froze. 20 doctors turned, furious. "What do you know, servant?" one snapped. But the king, he saw something in her eyes, something ancient, something older than fear. The maid set the bowl down beside the bed and lifted the boy's wrist. "His veins aren't rejecting life," she murmured. "They're rejecting sin. Stay with me until the end." Because what she did next not only brought the boy back, it revealed a secret buried for centuries beneath the royal crypt. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. Prince Damien had been dying for 17 days. The kingdom's most elite physicians had exhausted every remedy known to their kind. They'd tried fresh blood from virgin donors, ancient elixirs passed down through vampire nobility, even forbidden rituals that required sacrificing lower vampires to channel their life force. Nothing worked. Dr. Morteus, the king's personal physician for 3 centuries, wiped sweat from his brow as he examined the prince's deteriorating condition. The boy's fangs had retracted completely. His supernatural strength had vanished, and most alarming of all, his body was rejecting every drop of blood they offered him. "Sire," Dr. Morteus whispered to King Vladislav, "I fear we may need to consider that the prince's condition is beyond our understanding. Perhaps it's time to summon the Ancient Ones from the mountain caves." The king's red eyes flashed with rage. "The Ancient Ones haven't descended from their lairs in 500 years. They won't come for anyone, not even royal blood." He turned back to his son's bedside, his voice cracking with desperation. "There has to be something we're missing." The other physicians murmured among themselves, their confidence shattered. They'd tried everything in their vast medical knowledge. Blood transfusions from the purest vampire lineages, mystical herbs that grew only in moonlight, even prayers to the dark gods their ancestors once served. Yet Prince Damien continued to waste away, growing weaker with each passing hour. Meanwhile, in the servant quarters, far below the royal chambers, Ilara scrubbed floors with mechanical precision. She'd appeared at the castle gates 3 months ago, claiming to seek work. No one questioned a lone woman desperate for employment. The head butler had assigned her the lowest duties: cleaning, hauling water, disposing of waste. She performed her tasks without complaint, invisible to the noble vampires who ruled this domain. But Ilara was far from ordinary. As she worked, she listened, she observed, she noticed things others overlooked: the whispered conversations between panicked doctors, the increasingly desperate measures being attempted upstairs, the growing fear that permeated the castle walls like a disease. Most importantly, she recognized the symptoms being described: the rejection of blood, the loss of supernatural abilities, the gradual fading of vampiric traits. She'd seen this condition before, centuries ago, in a different kingdom under a different name. That evening, as Ilara cleaned the corridor outside the royal chambers, she overheard Dr. Morteus speaking with his assistant. "The prince's body is essentially reverting to human," he said, his voice thick with confusion. "It's as if something is stripping away his vampiric nature, but we can't identify the cause." Ilara paused in her scrubbing, her hand tightening around the brush handle. She knew exactly what was happening to the prince, and more importantly, she knew why the doctor's treatments were failing. They were approaching the problem backwards, trying to force more vampiric energy into a body that was actively rejecting it. The next morning brought even worse news. Prince Damien had slipped into a coma-like state, his breathing so shallow it was barely detectable. The king had summoned additional specialists from neighboring vampire territories, offering vast riches to anyone who could save his heir. Dr. Theron, a renowned healer from the eastern bloodlands, arrived with an entourage of assistants and exotic remedies. He examined the prince with great ceremony, pronouncing that the boy needed immediate infusion of royal blood mixed with powdered phoenix bone. Preposterous, scoffed Dr. Valeria, the kingdom's leading expert in blood disorders. The prince clearly requires exposure to concentrated moonlight while being fed blood from 7 different vampire clans. The physicians argued among themselves, each convinced their approach was correct. Meanwhile, the prince's condition continued to deteriorate. His skin, once the pale perfection of noble vampire bloodlines, had taken on an almost translucent quality. His dark hair was losing its luster, and his fingernails, once sharp as talons, had become brittle and human-like. King Vladislav paced the corridors like a caged beast, his fury growing with each failed attempt to heal his son. He'd ruled for 8 centuries, conquered neighboring kingdoms, and commanded legions of the undead, yet he was powerless to save the one thing that mattered most to him. As the sun set on the 18th day of the prince's illness, Ilara made her decision. She'd remained silent long enough, watching brilliant minds fail because they couldn't see beyond their own assumptions. The boy would die if she didn't act, and despite her lowly position, she couldn't stand by and let that happen. She gathered the few supplies she needed from the castle's extensive herb gardens and storage rooms. Nothing exotic or expensive, just simple ingredients that most would overlook. Then she prepared a small wooden bowl, carved from oak and blessed by methods the current generation of vampires had long forgotten. The castle bells tolled midnight as Ilara climbed the stairs to the royal chambers. Guards flanked every doorway, but servants moved freely through the corridors, invisible in their utility. She approached the prince's room where the desperate doctors continued their futile efforts, still arguing over treatments that would never work. That's when she stepped through the doorway, her bare feet silent on the stone floor, carrying nothing but her simple wooden bowl and centuries of knowledge these learned physicians had never encountered. The 20 doctors turned as one, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and irritation at the interruption. They saw only a lowly servant, someone beneath their notice, someone who couldn't possibly understand the complexities of their noble patient's condition. But the king saw something different in her steady gaze, something that made him hesitate before ordering her removal. In her eyes, he glimpsed an ancient wisdom that predated their modern medical practices, a knowledge that might hold the key to saving his dying son. "Silence," King Vladislav commanded, his voice cutting through the physicians' protests like a blade. The room stilled instantly. Every doctor, every assistant, every guard froze as the ancient monarch studied this strange servant who dared speak where others had failed. Dr. Mortius stepped forward, his face flushed with indignation. "Your Majesty, this woman is clearly delusional. We cannot allow some peasant maid to interfere with centuries of medical knowledge." Ilara didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the dying prince, her fingers still wrapped around his cold wrist. "Tell me, learned doctor," she said quietly, "when did you last see a vampire reject the blood of their own kind?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Mortius opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. The other physicians exchanged uncertain glances. In all their combined experience, they'd never encountered such a phenomenon. "Exactly my point," Ilara continued, her voice steady despite the 20 pairs of hostile eyes boring into her. "You're treating symptoms you don't understand with remedies that make no sense." She turned to face the king directly, showing no fear of his legendary wrath. "Your son isn't dying from illness, Your Majesty. He's dying from punishment." The word struck the room like lightning. Several doctors scoffed, But King Vladislav raised his hand for continued silence. Something about this woman's certainty, her complete lack of deference, demanded attention. "Punishment for what?" the king asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ilara gestured toward the prince's deteriorating form. "Look at the progression. First, his fangs retracted. Then his strength abandoned him. Now his body rejects the very essence of what he is." She paused, letting her words sink in. "This isn't random. It's systematic, deliberate." Dr. Valeria stepped closer, her scientific curiosity overriding her outrage. "Even if what you're suggesting were possible, what could cause such a reaction?" "Cursed blood," Ilara replied without hesitation. "Blood taken from someone who was innocent, someone who died in terror and pain." She looked around the room, noting how several faces had gone pale. "Tell me, doctors, where exactly did you source the blood you've been feeding him?" The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Morteus cleared his throat uncomfortably. "We used only the finest donors, volunteers from the village who—" "Volunteers?" Ilara's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you call terrified peasants dragged from their homes in the dead of night?" King Vladislav's expression darkened dangerously. "You forget yourself, servant. Watch your tongue." But Ilara pressed on, undaunted. "3 weeks ago, your hunting parties brought back a young mother. She had twin babies still nursing. Do you remember her screams echoing through these halls?" The king's jaw clenched. He remembered. They all remembered. "She prayed as you drained her," Ilara continued relentlessly. "Prayed to every god she knew to protect her children, to curse those who would murder an innocent mother." She gestured toward the prince. "Those prayers were answered." Dr. Theron scoffed from across the room. "Superstitious nonsense. Curses are folklore, not medicine." "Are they?" Ilara challenged. "Then explain why your patient grows weaker with every drop of blood you force into him. Explain why his vampiric nature is being stripped away layer by layer." She knelt beside the bed and gently lifted one of the prince's eyelids. His pupil was dilated, unfocused, but there was something else, a flicker of awareness, of pain that went deeper than physical suffering. "He can hear us," she whispered. "He's trapped inside his failing body, experiencing every moment of this transformation. The curse isn't just killing him. It's making him human again, forcing him to feel what his victims felt." The king staggered backward as if struck. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Ilara stood, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "When was the last time you saw him hunt? Really hunt? Not just feed from your captured prey?" The king's silence was answer enough. "He stopped hunting 3 months ago," Ilara continued. "Stopped taking pleasure in the chase, in the fear of his victims. Something changed in him, didn't it? He started questioning things, started showing mercy." Dr. Mortius shook his head vigorously. "Even if this woman's theory had merit, which it doesn't, there's no known cure for such a condition." "Because you've never looked for one," Ilara replied. "You've spent centuries perfecting the art of taking life, but you've forgotten how to preserve it." She picked up her wooden bowl, its simple surface seeming to glow in the candlelight. This bowl was carved from the heartwood of a tree that grew over a battlefield. Thousands died there, but over time, their blood nourished new life. Flowers bloomed where bodies fell. Life conquered death. She dipped the bowl into a basin of clear water that sat forgotten on a side table. The liquid immediately began to shimmer with an ethereal light. "The cure isn't more blood," she explained, swirling the glowing water gently. "It's absolution, forgiveness for the innocent lives taken, balance for the scales that have been tipped toward darkness." Dr. Valeria stepped closer, her scientific mind fascinated despite her skepticism. "What exactly are you planning to do?" "Give him what 20 doctors couldn't," Ilara replied simply. "A reason to live." She approached the bed where Prince Damien lay motionless, his breathing so shallow it was barely perceptible. The other physicians watched in tense silence as she carefully parted his lips and allowed 3 drops of the luminescent water to fall onto his tongue. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The prince's back arched off the bed, His mouth opened in a silent scream, and his eyes snapped open, revealing pupils that shifted between human brown and vampiric red. "He's convulsing!" Dr. Morteus shouted, rushing forward. "Stay back!" Ilara commanded with such authority that the ancient physician actually obeyed. "This is the curse fighting the cure. If you interfere now, you'll kill him." The prince's body writhed, as if invisible forces were tearing at him from within. His skin flickered between pale vampire perfection and human warmth. His fangs extended and retracted repeatedly. Most disturbing of all, tears of blood streamed down his cheeks. "What's happening to him?" King Vladislav demanded, his voice thick with panic. "He's experiencing every death," Ilara explained, never taking her eyes off the struggling prince. Every innocent life taken to sustain his existence. The mother with twins, the young father who tried to protect his family, the children who never had a chance to grow up. He's feeling their fear, their pain, their final moments. The prince's mouth opened wider, and this time sound emerged, a keening wail of anguish that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. The very walls of the chamber seemed to vibrate with his grief. Several doctors covered their ears, unable to bear the sound, but Ilara remained steady, her hand hovering over the prince's forehead without quite touching. "This is barbaric," Dr. Morteus protested. "You're torturing him." "I'm freeing him," Ilara corrected. "The curse can only be broken by genuine remorse, by accepting the weight of every life taken and choosing to change." The prince's convulsions began to subside, but his tears continued to flow. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, cracked with emotion. "I remember them all," he gasped, his eyes focusing on his father's face. "Every single one. Their names, their faces, their last words." He tried to sit up, his newly human strength barely sufficient for the task. "Father, what have we done?" "Done?" King Vladislav stared at his son, watching centuries of royal composure crumble in the face of genuine human emotion. The boy who had once reveled in the hunt, who had laughed at the pleas of his victims, now wept for every life he'd taken. "This changes nothing," Dr. Morteus declared, though his voice lacked conviction. "Emotional distress won't cure whatever affliction has befallen him." Ilara finally allowed herself to smile, the first expression of warmth she'd shown since entering the chamber. "Look closer, doctor. Really look." The physicians reluctantly approached the bed, their trained eyes scanning the prince's form. What they saw defied everything they understood about vampire physiology. Color was returning to Damien's skin, not the deathly pallor of their kind, but actual warmth, actual life. His breathing deepened, became more regular. Most shocking of all, his heartbeat grew stronger, more human. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Valeria, checking his pulse with trembling fingers. "His heart is beating at human rhythm, 60 beats per minute, steady and strong, because he's choosing humanity over monstrosity," Ilara explained. "The curse wasn't meant to kill him. It was meant to offer him a choice. Death as a vampire, or life as something better." King Vladislav's face contorted with rage and confusion. "Better! You dare suggest that humanity is superior to our noble bloodline?" "Your noble bloodline," Ilara replied calmly, "has terrorized innocent people for 1,000 years. Tell me, your majesty, what exactly is noble about that?" The king's hand moved to his sword, but his son's voice stopped him cold. "She's right, father." Prince Damien struggled to sit upright, his movements weak but determined. "I've spent the last 3 weeks reliving every hunt, every kill. I've felt what they felt. The terror, the helplessness, the desperate love for families they'd never see again." His voice broke as fresh tears flowed down his cheeks. "There was a little girl, maybe 7 years old. She was hiding under her bed when we found her. Do you remember what I did?" The king's silence was thunderous. "I pulled her out by her hair," Damien continued, his voice hollow with self-loathing. "She kept calling for her mother, but her mother was already dead. I thought it was amusing. I laughed while she begged." Dr. Theron shifted uncomfortably. Your Highness, you were simply following your nature. Vampires are predators. It's the natural order. Natural? Damien's laugh was bitter. What's natural about torturing children? What's natural about finding joy in suffering? He turned to Alara, his eyes filled with desperate hope. You said I had a choice. What happens if I choose humanity? What happens to what I was? The vampire dies, she answered honestly. Your supernatural strength, your immortality, your ability to transform others, all of it disappears forever. You become fully human, with a human lifespan and human frailties. And if I choose to remain vampire, the curse completes its work. You die within the hour, and your soul carries the weight of every innocent life you've taken into whatever comes after. The room fell silent except for the prince's labored breathing. 20 brilliant minds grappled with concepts beyond their medical training, watching their patient face a decision that would reshape everything they thought they knew about their species. King Vladislav approached his son's bedside, his ancient face etched with centuries of pain he'd never allowed himself to feel. Damien, you are my heir, the future of our kingdom. If you choose humanity, our bloodline dies with you. Maybe it should, the prince whispered. Maybe some bloodlines aren't worth preserving. The king recoiled as if struck. You would abandon everything, your power, your position, your immortal legacy, for the chance to sleep without nightmares. Damien met his father's gaze steadily, for the possibility of finding peace instead of endless hunger. Yes, father, I would abandon all of it. Dr. Morteus stepped forward, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. Even if this transformation is possible, how do we know it's reversible? What if the boy regrets his choice? Some choices, Alara said quietly, aren't meant to be reversible. That's what makes them meaningful. She knelt beside the bed and placed her hand gently on Damien's forehead. The water I gave you has awakened your conscience, but the final transformation requires something more. It requires you to actively reject what you were and embrace what you could become. How? He asked. You must choose to feel compassion instead of hunger. You must choose to protect instead of prey. Most importantly, you must choose to value every human life as precious, including your own. King Vladislav watched his son's face transform as understanding dawned. The cruel amusement that had always lurked behind Damien's eyes was gone, replaced by something the king had never seen there before: genuine kindness. I choose humanity, Prince Damien said firmly. I choose to live with consequences instead of hiding from them. I choose to try to make amends for what I've done, even if I can never fully succeed. The moment the words left his lips, the transformation accelerated. His fangs retracted completely and didn't return. His pale skin warmed to human temperature. His eyes shifted from predatory red to warm brown and stayed that way. But the most dramatic change was invisible to the watching physicians. For the first time in his existence, Prince Damien felt truly alive, not sustained by stolen blood and supernatural energy, but animated by his own beating heart and flowing blood. It's done, Alara announced, stepping back from the bed. He's human now, completely and permanently. Dr. Valeria checked his vital signs with instruments that had never been used on a human patient. Blood pressure normal, heart rate steady, body temperature 98.6 degrees. By every measure, he's become fully human. But how? Dr. Theron demanded. What force could accomplish such a complete transformation? Love, Alara replied simply. The mother who died to feed him loved her children more than her own life. That love became a curse on those who would murder innocents, but also a blessing for those willing to choose differently. She picked up her wooden bowl, now empty of its glowing contents. This bowl has held the tears of every parent who lost a child to vampire predation. Their grief became a powerful force for change, waiting for someone worthy of redemption. King Vladislav stared at his transformed son, his expression cycling through rage, grief, and something that might have been pride. You're no longer my heir, he said finally. You're no longer even my kind. I know, Damien replied, his voice steady despite his obvious exhaustion. but maybe I can finally be someone worth being proud of." The king turned away, unable to face the human warmth in his son's eyes. "Guards, escort this woman from the palace. She's no longer welcome here." "Actually," Damien interjected, struggling to his feet with newfound human weakness, "she's staying. As my advisor, my teacher, and my friend." "You have no authority to make such decisions," the king snapped. "Then I'll leave," Damien said simply. "I'll go out into the world as a human and try to undo some of the damage I've caused. But she comes with me." The standoff between father and son stretched taut with unspoken grief. 1,000 years of vampire tradition faced the simple moral courage of one transformed heart. Finally, King Vladislav spoke, his voice barely audible. "If you leave this palace, you can never return. If you choose humanity over your heritage, you die to me forever." "I understand," Damien replied. "And Father, I forgive you for everything you taught me to become and everything you couldn't teach me to overcome." The words hung in the air like a final benediction. King Vladislav turned and strode from the chamber without another word, leaving behind 20 confused doctors, one redeemed prince, and a mysterious woman who had accomplished the impossible. As the dawn light began to filter through the palace windows, Ilara helped Damien gather his few possessions. His human body tired easily, but his spirit seemed lighter with each passing moment. "Where will we go?" he asked, as they prepared to leave the only home he'd ever known. "To the village where that young mother lived," Ilara replied. "Her twins are now orphans, being raised by their grandmother. They'll need help, protection, and support to survive." "And you think they'll accept help from me? From the monster who killed their mother?" "Not immediately," she admitted. "But redemption isn't about being forgiven quickly. It's about spending whatever time you have left trying to heal the wounds you've caused." As they walked through the palace corridors toward freedom, Damien felt something he'd never experienced before. Hope. Not the desperate hope of a predator seeking prey, but the quiet hope of someone who had found purpose beyond himself. Behind them, in the royal chamber, 20 doctors tried to make sense of what they'd witnessed. Their medical knowledge had proven useless against a force beyond their understanding. Some would spend years trying to replicate what the mysterious woman had accomplished. Others would quietly begin questioning their own complicity in centuries of atrocity. But none would ever forget the night a simple servant woman had saved a prince's soul by showing him how to choose love over hunger, humanity over monstrosity, and hope over despair. The real miracle wasn't the transformation itself. It was the proof that even the darkest heart could choose to beat with compassion, if only someone was brave enough to show them the way. The way. Outside the palace walls, the transformation of Prince Damien from vampire to human sent shockwaves through the supernatural world. Word traveled fast among the undead. A vampire prince had chosen mortality. A servant had accomplished what 20 royal physicians could not. The impossible had become reality. In the village below, whispers spread like wildfire. The grandmother caring for the orphaned twins noticed strange changes in the wind patterns. Animals that had fled the area months ago began returning. Children who had suffered nightmares about pale monsters finally slept peacefully. Something fundamental had shifted in the balance between darkness and light. Ilara and Damien reached the village as morning mist clung to thatched roofs and cobblestone streets. His human legs trembled with exhaustion after walking just 2 miles. The weakness was humbling for someone who had once moved faster than human eyes could track. "The irony isn't lost on me," Damien said, leaning against a stone wall to catch his breath. "I spent centuries feeding on human blood to sustain supernatural strength, and now I can barely walk to the next village without resting." "Strength isn't just physical," Ilara replied, offering him water from a leather pouch. "The courage to choose. Transformation over comfort requires more power than any vampire magic could provide." They approached a modest cottage where smoke rose from the chimney. Through the window, they could see an elderly woman preparing breakfast, while 2 small children played on the floor. The twins their mother had died protecting. Damien stopped walking, His newly human heart pounded with anxiety he'd never experienced as a vampire. What if they recognize me? What if the grandmother remembers my face from that night? She will, Ilara said simply. The question is, what will you do when she does? The cottage door opened before they could knock. The grandmother stood in the doorway, her weathered face showing no surprise at their arrival. Her eyes moved between Ilara and Damien, lingering on his transformed features. I wondered when you'd come, she said quietly. My daughter visits me in dreams. She said someone would arrive to make amends. Damien's throat constricted. Speaking required effort his vampire vocal cords had never needed. I'm the one who killed her. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want to help care for her children if you'll allow it. The grandmother studied his face for a long moment. Where once she would have seen predatory coldness, she now found genuine remorse and human warmth. My name is Martha, she said finally. These are Emma and Samuel. They're 4 years old now. She stepped aside, allowing them entry. Come inside. We have much to discuss. The cottage interior was simple but clean. The twins played with wooden toys their mother had carved before her death. When they looked up at the strangers, Damien saw their mother's eyes staring back at him. The resemblance hit him like a physical blow. Emma, Samuel, Martha called softly. Come meet our visitors. The children approached with the fearless curiosity of 4-year-olds. Emma, slightly taller than her brother, had her mother's dark curls. Samuel possessed the same gentle smile that had haunted Damien's memories. Are you sick? Emma asked, noting Damien's pale complexion and trembling hands. In a way, he replied honestly, but I'm getting better. Grandmother makes the best soup when people are sick, Samuel offered helpfully. She made me soup when I had fever dreams about scary monsters. The words struck Damien like daggers. These children had nightmares about creatures like what he used to be. Yet here they were, offering kindness to a stranger. Martha prepared tea while Ilara explained their situation. She spoke carefully, avoiding details that would traumatize the children while being honest about Damien's transformation and desire to make amends. The man who hurt your mother is gone forever, Martha told the twins during lunch. This is someone different, someone who wants to help protect you. Like a guardian? Emma asked, her 4-year-old mind trying to process complex adult concepts? Something like that, Martha confirmed. Over the following days, a routine developed. Damien's human body required rest, food, and sleep in ways his vampire form never had. Simple tasks like chopping wood or drawing water from the well exhausted him quickly. But he persisted, driven by determination to prove his commitment to change. The children gradually warmed to his presence. Samuel showed him how to stack blocks without them falling. Emma taught him a clapping game her mother had invented. Their innocent acceptance of his transformed self provided healing he hadn't known was possible. You're different from other grown-ups, Emma observed one evening as Damien helped her practice writing letters. You listen like you're learning too. I am learning, he admitted. Learning how to be human. Learning how to be kind. Learning how to care about others more than myself. Martha watched these interactions with careful attention. Her daughter's death had left her bitter toward all supernatural beings. Yet this transformed vampire showed genuine remorse and dedication to making amends. Why did you really come here? She asked Ilara one evening after the children were asleep. Because redemption requires action, not just intention, Ilara replied. Damien could have chosen to live quietly as a human, avoiding reminders of his past. Instead, he chose the harder path of facing those he'd wronged. And you? What's your role in this transformation? Ilara smiled mysteriously. I help people find their true selves. Sometimes that means showing them what they could lose. Sometimes it means showing them what they could become. As weeks passed, word of the transformed vampire reached other supernatural communities. Some viewed Damien's choice as betrayal of their kind. Others saw it as weakness. A few began to question their own existence and purpose. Sometimes the most powerful cure isn't found in ancient texts or royal physicians' knowledge. It's discovered by those who see what others miss. who understand that true healing requires more than medicine. Ilara didn't just save Prince Damien's life that night. She proved that even the darkest souls can choose light when someone shows them the way. The 20 doctors had all the credentials, all the experience, centuries of combined wisdom. Yet they failed because they treated symptoms instead of causes, bodies instead of souls. One humble servant succeeded where they couldn't, because she recognized that some illnesses require moral medicine, not magical remedies. What strikes me most about this story isn't the supernatural transformation itself. It's the reminder that redemption is always possible, but it requires courage to face what we've done and commitment to become something better.